international papers this time. And Nicholas, I believe you're going to start with a cartoon.
A cartoon about a serious issue, the events in the States, about those riots, the police crackdown on rioters. There you can see the Guardian's cartoon there, showing the Statue of Liberty, with a tear gas mask on her face. And in one hand there is a tear gas canister. In the other hand there is a book saying civil liberties. So pointing to this whole question of civil rights, justice, freedom, democracy, all the things that America is kind of symbolic of.
And which we're watching very closely, especially with what's happening in Missouri. I believe you've been taking a look at the American papers for us.
Well, let's look at the front page of the USA Today's international edition, and there you can see the message there, curfew imposed in Ferguson. Now, its quote there is, "The world is watching as folks cite broken trust with police." Another quote in that piece is that the USA Amnesty International spokeswoman is saying the people of Ferguson do not feel that they are being heard, and they should be protected in terms of their rights. Their rights should not be restricted. I also looked at the local press, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, which is just very close, of course, to where events are taking place there. An editorial, not this Monday, but in the recent days, is saying that, hold on, what we need is education. You know, we need to have investment in communities. Now, the quote at the top of that piece is from none other than Martin Luther King. He, in 1966, when race riots swept America, said this phrase, which the editorial in the St. Louis Dispatch says has become ubiquitous with events now. And that phrase is, "I think we have got to see that a riot is the language of the unheard." And so the editorial argues, yes, we're hearing that. These people are not heard. Let's listen to them. So there's a plea there. Let's look at the cartoon more closely in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It's showing there, simple question. What is best for the community? A, riot police, or B, more teachers? So when reading it, I got the sense of the tension and the difficulties about this problem.
Okay, now, Nicholas, let's move to Africa and, you know, that outbreak of the Ebola virus, the worst ever in the world's history.
Well, I chose the next article, in fact, just simply because of the headline, which is just staggering. Here it is. There is no Ebola in Liberia. Looters chant as they steal infected items from a health clinic. Like, I had to do a double take there, Eve. Like, what happened, of course, in Monrovia, the capital of Liberia, over the weekend, was that these guys, a group of armed young men with clubs, broke down the door of this clinic. The 20 people who are infected with Ebola fled, and now those looters actually took items that were actually infected, so with items that had blood on them, vomit on them, excrement on them. So it's like, what on earth is going on? And this perhaps is a reflection of the scale of ignorance. The chanting of those armed looters was, there is no Ebola because Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the president of Liberia, wants money. She's trying to get attention onto the country to raise money for the crisis that the economy is going through in the country. So a sort of staggering amount of ignorance, really, about the dangers of this disease.
Indeed, as well as taking the instruments, there's still 17 patients, I believe, missing since having fled that unit. Now, Nicholas, there's been some good news in parts concerning that Ebola outbreak, though we've seen some experimental medicines, not in the quantity we would perhaps like, but, you know, being produced in the United States and in Canada. However, I believe some papers are critical about these as well.
Well, there's a whole talk now about a small experiment. It's less than a handful, like 3-4 people have been treated, doctors. Now, of course, that gets a buzz in the press, but if you go to the Nigerian paper, The Punch, one comment piece is saying, yes, there are trials of what's called the ZMapp serum, but that's promising for the long term. But hold on, wait a minute. Isn't it puzzling that over 1,000 Africans have to die before any talk of a vaccine takes place? So pointing there, as you can see in the headline there, of American hypocrisy about developing this drug. Now, that piece there is arguing that should a vaccine ever become available, remember the doses of serum available are minute, perhaps 10 or 12 at this point, so this is not a major factor in terms of the treatment of this outbreak. But should this vaccines or any drugs come into play, what will happen is again ignorance on the ground in remote villages in places like Liberia. They're not even taking the polio vaccine because they say it's white men's medicine. They're saying that it's white man's intrusion. So you have a huge outbreak going on. The headline of the International Herald Tribune is saying Ebola fight gets harder as doctors retreat. So we're seeing a very big problem here.
Okay, now let's try and turn to lighter things, if you don't mind, Nicholas. After looking at how laboratories are dealing with the Ebola vaccine, there are different laboratories that are looking at chocolate.
Well, and for something completely different, as Monty Python would say, we're from the sublime to the ridiculous. So we go straight to this whole story that's out there that I liked a lot. It's about a PhD in chocolate studies that's out there for you to do, Eve.
Oh, that appeals. I have to say, all of a sudden, I might go back.
At Cambridge University. Now, actually, it's very serious stuff. 3.5-year study into how to stop the chocolate melting when it gets out into the sun. I can see you both paying very close attention to this very tricky dilemma for us. Now, of course, you need to have very good maths. It's in the chemical engineering department, so it's not for everybody. The deadline for applying to become a doctor of chocolate is the 29th of August. I will not be applying because my maths are 0, but it's there for people if they want to take it, and I will be, well, eating lots of chocolate anyway, no matter what happens.
Exactly. I will support whoever makes this breakthrough, a very important one in my opinion. Nicholas Rushworth, thank you so much for that look at the international papers. That brings us to the end of this edition of Live from Paris. Do take care.